Israel's strike on Qatar wasn't just another episode in the region's turmoil. It marked one of the most serious economic and geopolitical blows the United States has faced in decades. And it happened under Donald Trump's watch.
President Trump posted on Truth Social that he was notified of the attack by the U.S. military, not Israel, shortly before it happened, and tried to warn Qatar, adding, "This does not advance Israel or America's goal."
Qatar is far from a minor player. It hosts the largest American military base in the Gulf and holds immense natural gas reserves that keep both Europe and Asia supplied. Yet when the strike occurred, Trump remained silent until the moment had already passed. That hesitation echoed across the Arab world and raised doubts about whether Washington could still be relied on. For the Arab League, which had long balanced frustration with cooperation, the sense of betrayal has now become undeniable. And in this part of the world, such moments shape relationships for generations. The uncomfortable truth is that this moment goes beyond Qatar. It speaks to a collapse of trust between the United States and the Arab world. Into that vacuum stepped Russia, presenting itself as a partner that offers weapons, security cooperation, and a measure of respect. At the same time, BRICS has begun to look less like an experiment and more like the foundation of a new economic system, while the dollar steadily loses ground. What we are witnessing is not just a diplomatic stumble, but the slow unraveling of American dominance. But before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, because what's collapsing today will shape tomorrow's world. Israel's strike on Qatar shook the Middle East, but the real story isn't the attack itself. It's the way Donald Trump responded, or more accurately, how he failed to respond when it mattered. Only months earlier, he was touring Gulf capitals, shaking hands with monarchs, smiling for cameras, and promising stronger partnerships. He wanted to project America as dependable. Yet when Qatar came under fire, that image collapsed in an instant. To this day, it's unclear what Trump knew before the strike. Did Israel warn Washington, or was the White House blindsided? What we do know, because Doha confirmed it, is that Trump didn't call until 20 minutes after the attack ended. On paper, that may sound minor, but in this region, timing is everything. Every second signals intent. That hesitation sparked doubts across Arab capitals. Was Washington complicit? Was Trump caught unprepared? Or was the U.S. unwilling to defend an ally it had called indispensable? The stakes could not be higher. Qatar is far from a minor Gulf state. With one of the highest GDP per capita levels in the world, it holds around 13% of proven global gas reserves and exports over 80 million tons of LNG annually. That gas keeps Europe afloat as it replaces Russian pipelines, and it powers Asia, where Japan, South Korea, China, and India rely on long-term contracts. When Qatar is destabilized, energy markets convulse, prices spike, supply chains weaken, and economies from Berlin to Tokyo feel the strain. For Washington, Qatar's importance is even more strategic. The Al-Udeid airbase is the largest U.S. installation in the Middle East and the nerve center of American operations. Over 10,000 personnel are stationed there, directing missions across Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. Without it, America's military posture in the Gulf would collapse almost overnight. So what message does it send when a nation hosting this critical base is attacked, and the American president responds with a delayed phone call? Leaders in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Egypt are asking, if Qatar, with all its wealth and U.S. presence, can be hit while Washington hesitates, how safe are they? And Qatar's role stretches even further. Its sovereign wealth fund controls nearly $500 billion in assets, from European banks and automakers to prime real estate in New York and London. If a country this integrated into Western markets is treated as expendable, what do U.S. promises really mean? Trump's hesitation is especially damaging because it came after months of personal outreach. He praised Gulf rulers, styled himself as the deal-maker who could bring stability, and promised stronger trust. But when the test came, Washington faltered. That gap between lofty promises and inaction is what stings most in Arab capitals. In Washington, alarm is growing. The Arab League does not see this as an isolated event, but as proof America can no longer be relied upon to defend even close partners. The late phone call, the lack of immediate action, and the perception that Israel acted unchecked are fueling doubts about America's role as the Gulf's security guarantor. The Middle East rarely forgets moments like this. Trust, once lost, is hard to rebuild, and when it fades, other powers rush in. Russia, China, and BRICS are already filling the gap. That is why this episode is being called a turning point. It's not just about Qatar. It marks the beginning of a larger unraveling of U.S. influence across the region. Trump's 20-minute delay may seem small, but in that narrow window, the Arab world concluded that America would not, or could not, stand by them. From that moment, the fallout grew far beyond the battlefield. Energy flows are shifting, alliances weakening, financial networks searching for new anchors, and Washington's rivals moving quickly to expand their reach. For decades, Arab states accepted America's dominance in the region for one reason: Washington promised protection. That understanding was the foundation of every deal, every arms purchase, every political compromise. But by the time Israel struck Qatar, the ground had already shifted. Many Arab economies were quietly looking east. Trade with China had already surpassed trade with the US in several countries. Russia was no longer just a distant power. It was supplying weapons, signing nuclear energy agreements, and forging closer political ties. At the same time, Gulf monarchies were testing oil sales in yuan, preparing for a world where the dollar might not be the only option. The strike on Qatar didn't create this trend. It accelerated it. What had been gradual discontent turned into open defiance. Russia seized the moment. Moscow wasted no time presenting itself as the alternative. While Washington hesitated, Russia reached out directly, offering security guarantees, intelligence cooperation, and a pledge of non-interference. It was the exact reassurance Arab leaders wanted but never received from Trump. Even at the diplomatic level, Moscow moved with speed. The foreign minister condemned the strike in sharp, unambiguous terms, contrasting America's silence with Russia's decisive language. Leaders across the region took notice. They know Russia can be ruthless, but they also see consistency in how it honors commitments. That matters in a region where broken promises are remembered for generations. The United Arab Emirates has expanded purchases of advanced Russian weapons. Egypt has signed massive energy contracts with Moscow. Saudi Arabia openly coordinates oil policy with Russia through OPEC+. The anger over Qatar has pushed more leaders to step closer to Moscow, convinced it offers the respect Washington withholds. And the shift isn't just political, it's financial. Every new arms deal, every oil agreement, every infrastructure project signed with Moscow redirects billions away from US firms. For Russia, this crisis was a gift. For Washington, it was damage inflicted by its own choices. The deeper concern is that Russia is no longer just competing for influence. It is edging into America's old role as guarantor of Gulf security. Once that perception hardens, history shows it is nearly impossible to reverse. By failing to act when Qatar was attacked, Trump only made that perception stronger. The aftermath is already visible, and Washington is paying the price. Oil markets are climbing, energy imports are becoming costlier, and defense contracts once guaranteed to American companies are slipping away as Gulf states turn east for their weapons. At the same time, demand for dollars in global trade is weakening as more nations experiment with settling energy deals in other currencies. These are not theoretical risks. They are real costs hitting the US economy, and they are unfolding faster than Washington can adjust. For Arab nations, the shock of what happened in Qatar won't fade easily. The country was attacked while hosting America's largest military base in the region. That humiliation cannot be overlooked, not by Qatar and not by its neighbors. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have drawn their own conclusion. If Washington cannot be trusted, then it cannot remain the foundation of their security or their economy. That's why they are hedging, strengthening ties with Russia and China, and giving BRICS a larger role in shaping a new order that no longer revolves around the United States. For decades, The dollar has been the backbone of global oil trade. Every barrel sold in the Gulf, every OPEC agreement, was denominated in dollars. That arrangement gave Washington enormous leverage, economic and political alike. But now the system is showing cracks. What once seemed unthinkable is already happening. Oil being traded outside the dollar. The fallout over Qatar has accelerated this shift. Saudi Arabia has quietly accepted Chinese yuan for some shipments. The UAE has begun exploring deals that bypass the dollar entirely. And in 2023, Qatar signed an oil deal with India settled in Indian rupees, a decision that went beyond diversification. It was a signal that trust in America's role is eroding. The dollar's dominance was built on three pillars: stability, reliability, and partnership. Arab leaders now doubt all three. If the US cannot be relied upon as a security partner, why should its currency remain the bedrock of their trade? Why not use the yuan, the ruble, or even regional payment systems supported by BRICS? This is not a distant possibility. It is happening in stages right now. China, the world's largest oil buyer, is locking in long-term contracts directly in yuan. Russia, cut off from the dollar system by sanctions, is pushing Arab partners to build financial links outside US control. Even smaller Gulf states are beginning to experiment with limited non-dollar settlements. Each agreement chips away at the financial order Washington once treated as untouchable. And if the momentum continues, the United States will face a world where its dollar no longer sets the price of energy. Right now, Trump is scrambling. Israel's strike on Qatar sent the White House into full damage control, forcing an urgent face-to-face meeting with Qatar's leadership in New York. Under normal circumstances, such a meeting would highlight strong ties and shared interests. This time, the atmosphere was tense. Qatar didn't come to celebrate new partnerships. It came to confront Washington. And across the Arab League, leaders are watching every word, knowing that Trump's handling of this moment could determine whether America remains a credible partner or slides further into irrelevance. Trump did condemn the strike, but the tone was muted. He called it unfortunate, avoided tough language, and offered no hint of consequences for Israel. Behind closed doors, he even reassured Israeli officials of America's ironclad support. To Arab leaders, this looked less like leadership and more like an attempt to straddle both sides, comforting Qatar with polite statements while shielding Israel from accountability. Qatar, however, holds real leverage. It controls nearly a quarter of the world's LNG exports, and its relationships with Russia and China are growing deeper by the year. In New York, Qatari officials arrived with bargaining power. Trump arrived with little more than promises. Unless he takes the step Arab leaders are waiting for, demanding accountability from Israel, his words will be dismissed as hollow. And all indications suggest he won't take that step, leaving US influence in the Middle East hanging by a thread. This story is far from finished. The meetings, the private negotiations, the shifting energy deals, everything is still unfolding, and the consequences could reshape global politics for years to come. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and follow closely. The next chapter of this crisis is already being written, and it will be impossible to ignore.